In a global society where no one seems to agree about anything, there is at least one thing that we all share, and that is an awareness that the world is changing politically, socially, economically, and certainly technologically. Things that happen on one side of the planet can affect the way we live on the other. And the way this effect is felt is in the behaviour of governments and corporations, in the communities we live in, and for many of us, the way we feel about ourselves. Influences like COVID, terrorism, racism, internationalism have disrupted the normal way of life, and doubts, frustrations, and insecurities have spread like wildfire. Even the business community is divided by political influence, and few have found the effects more devastating than the owners of small and independent businesses. The call for leadership has never been so high. One organisation that has stood up to answer this call is the Society of Free and Independent Enterprise, SOFI, started by James Hunt. SOFI's mission is to help businesses navigate the moral dilemmas of a fractured society, but also to defend that unobscured freedom to trade. I'm joined today by two pioneers of integrity in the modern world. James Hunt, founder of SOFI and independent businessman of Everyman Advisory, and Roscoe from 369 Freedom, whose fascinating perspective on the application of UK law has become a real source of power for SOFI's development. So welcome both.
Thank you, Alastair.
Roscoe, maybe we could start with you, please.
Sure.
Your work with 369, what is the essence of 369?
Well, its primary essence is to connect people with their own apprehension of what law really ought to be about, and where perhaps law comes from, and gain a sense of that. Working within a common framework of the foundational elements of superintendence of common law. The 369 builds on a premise that every man ought to know the law, and indeed possibly every man does know the law when we connect with our sense of conscience, of good conscience, in the framework and structure of our community. I proffer that as a loose description of what common law might look like to each of us individually. So 369 it's moving on those principles as a foundational platform from which to examine other elements that are taking place in society, other functions of government, particularly in public office, and how anyone might protect themselves, if that's the right word, or address any irregularities in public office when those irregularities are directly affecting themselves. So it's a multi-pronged approach of establishing an understanding for people to seek lawful remedy, and a mechanism, a template-based mechanism that they can use to advance that remedy themselves without having to, without need of recourse of engaging a solicitor necessarily, but advancing their own claim and establishing a line in the sand, as it were, with these templates of what is termed a notice of liability, a template notice of liability to the potential wrongdoer in office. So its essence is to reconnect people with their own sense of right justice in their own capacity as living beings, and how to go about prosecuting or pursuing that, I should say, in their experience in life. So it's that connection with law. The law, one might say, is that which is most right, or the height of reasoning, as it were. So and that cannot necessarily take place without a proper connection with a sense of conscience expressed and experienced in the context of one's community, and then with then interpreted and applied in a way that is lawful and effective. So that really is the essence of the 369, a
Okay.
lawful remedy. Yeah.
And how would you explain the difference between the practice of common law and what we should call maybe ordinary law?
Well, interesting, this word ordinary, I guess, but common law, and should common law be antithetical to ordinary law? The common law, I suppose, one of the framing elements of common law is that it ought to be something that all may commonly have an inherent grasp of, as it were. It should be something that is not alien in its nature or in its application to the common sense of people in society at large. So ordinary law, if I understand what you mean by that, possibly would be sort of the statutory provisions that regulates our functions in society, the function of people in society and how they interact with one another. So if we take that as the definition of ordinary law, I would say common law is first and foremost concerned with that which is most right. So that would right where right is interpreted not just to mean what is most correct, but that which has the highest claim of right, that position which has the highest claim of right. So and the ordinary law might be more to do with what is most balanced and fair amongst the community, how our actions, how we conduct ourselves in the community in a way that doesn't advantage or disadvantage any one group more than another necessarily. So those possibly would be two possible distinctions I might make to distinguish between them. So it's a matter of application as well. That those two elements, what is most right and what is most fair, are not necessarily antithetical to one another. But I like to refer to the biblical story of Solomon, the wisdom of Solomon, with the two women brought before him, asking him to adjudge who is the mother of the infant over which the two women are quarreling. To be have a claim of being the mother, and Solomon interviews both of them, and both women put forward a very persuasive case that they each are the mother, and Solomon says, well, in that case, each shall have half of the infant. That is the equitable ordinary law, which is fair to all parties, as it were. But of course, the real mother revealed herself when she broke down and begged him to spare the child, even if it meant giving the child to the other woman, as long as the child's life was spared. That is right law, common law, I would say, prevailed. So that would be the distinction and demonstration I would make.
Sounds like a great example. And what opportunity does this knowledge, your knowledge, create for business owners?
Okay, well, I think it's that fine. It's where the two meet. What is most right for the individual or whatever class of group that's being considered, whether it's single individual or a group, could be a business, and what is fair and just. How that individual or group function in relation to other members of society. So it's where those two interests butt up and meet. So if the interests of what is of equal rights in society, ordinary law, let's say, invades too much the arena of what is most right for business owners, to the prejudice against the interests unfairly of those business owners, then I would say that there is a right amongst those business owners at law to push back that invasion to the point where which is more equitable between those two interests, the interest of most right with the interest of ordinary law, what is considered most fair in society at large. So if someone is being impacted in a way through public policy, ordinary law, public policy, which is public policy which is generated and informed to protect the common good in the public, if that invades too much the rights of the individuals running the business, then those individuals running the business may use common law, their right law, to challenge that invasion, essentially the wrong or the trespass. It was a harm or a loss or an injury, or some other sort of incursion upon their rights. So would have to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, obviously. But those are the principles, I would say, that are at operation. So it may apply. It may be brought to apply where someone is actually being affected in their individual capacity as a being, they're running the business, they're being deprived the opportunity to support their family. Their right of life is under attack. So that would be a position, I would say, is as an example, that maybe offer some standing to push back against the invasion of public policy.
Okay, that makes sense. That's great. And James, if I could turn to you now, as you have been and are a practicing lawyer, this clearly resonates with you. But before we look into that, maybe you could explain, why did you start Sophie, and what's your plan with it?
So I started Sophie in April, May of 2020. It was, though, an idea that had been germinating for quite a while. And it came from a sense that there was no organisation where business owners who have a very special responsibility, where those business owners could meet, form a community with others who were sharing the challenges they were sharing of growing a business. And the biggest challenge for growing a business is working out what you're going to do when you step away from it. So I developed over a number of years something that I called the BOSS, the Business Owner's Succession Strategy, which is all about working out a way of passing control to a new generation of owners in a way that typically doesn't involve external finance. So it always seemed to me that was the right way to do things, because then the people who were affected could all be sitting around the table with some guidance from a practitioner like myself. So that was the sense that there's nowhere where business owners can go to meet other business owners. So I was a member at that stage of the Institute of Directors, and we were having debates about whether our real target market was directors working for big corporations or was owner managers. Now, I've spent all of my life acting for owner managers, even if they're running small businesses or perhaps quite large businesses, but it was that connection they have and that shared feeling of pain that they as owner managers have that I could see wasn't being fulfilled. So that's why I set up Sophie, in desperate frustration that there wasn't a club that I could put my heart into.
And how did you meet Roscoe, and what encouraged you to become a 369 practitioner?
Well, that was rather weird, because it was only a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, Roscoe?
That's right.
At Roscoe's home in Richmond. So with my wife, Alison, I went to meet a new friend, Chris, and another new friend, Rose. And Rose took me to Roscoe's home. And I suddenly found all of my prejudices about the law as a 40-year practicing lawyer being challenged by Roscoe. And instinctively, I felt he was correctly challenging them. This idea that the common law, the law of the land, should have superintendence over statute law, which was exactly the reverse of what we'd been taught at university. There was another very nice lady at Roscoe's home that day, Amy, and she and I would both say, well, that's not what we were taught at the College of Law. And I was certainly thinking, yeah, perhaps I've been ignorant all my life. Well, we're all ignorant all our lives, aren't we, anyway? Hopefully we're all now going to see the light. And I do think what Roscoe has to offer with this 369 is utterly fundamental to the challenges we're facing. Because at the moment, what we have is big government, big corporations who are making decisions that, to my mind, are wholly unethical and impractical. And you have to ask yourself, why is it happening? Well, I think there's a very simple reason. and that's a corporation can act in an amoral fashion using the agency of immoral people for that purpose. And this is what 369 enables us to do, to hold people who might be making an honest mistake, to hold them accountable as moral agents. So they have to bring morality into the function of their public office. And if they don't, they can be made personally liable. It's what happened, of course, in 1947, after we discovered the horrors of Nazi Germany. The Nuremberg Code of 1947 wrote down that you must not conduct experiments on men and women unless they give their fully informed consent.
Okay, no, it's I understand that, and I suppose maybe just a little bit further, where do you think 369 can help businesses? Certainly in your work with Sophie.
I'm not quite sure at the moment, but I think it can be absolutely fundamental, because what you've got is the sense that each of us running a small business has no power. The system is overwhelmingly powerful and it's going in a particular direction and none of us can stop it. So I was having conversations with some of my chums recently, and they were saying, well, if the government should decide that everyone must be vaccinated, then of course I'm a law-abiding citizen. I will obey the law. And as a non-practicing solicitor, as I now am, I was appalled, I'm afraid, at that approach, that each of us could decide that we will allow a wholly amoral law to be enacted and feel we had to follow it. I mean, it's just wrong. And each of us must know, if we're looking at things personally and individually in our own hearts, that that is wrong. So how can we as a society conclude that, oh yeah, our personal morality is irrelevant. We must, for the common good, we must compulsorily vaccinate people, or if they're not compulsorily vaccinated, they're a lesser human being. It's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. And maybe a good example we should look at over the last 18 months, of course, we've been going through the pandemic. Maybe I could ask each of you, in the light of what you've both just been saying, what have we learned really from the last 18 months, and what lessons can we take? Roscoe, what are your biggest fears on the impact of the pandemic?
I think the obvious one that probably everyone is sharing is this polarization of society. That polarization is going to deepen the divide between the two camps that feel that the common good overrides essentially the right of the individual, not to be harmed for the sake of the common good. So it's that polarization that I find most alarming, and the fracture in society that's going to cause if it continues at the pace that it is. But on the flip side of that same coin, I also see that that's an opportunity for great possible change, where people may seek to find their common ground in spite of these deep divisions, and explore possible avenues of compassion for one another's position. There is that camp in society that believes that vaccinating or these social distancing measures are for the common good and work and are an unselfish thing to do. And there's another camp that feels quite the opposite, but for the same sense of reasoning and the same motives, but have come to the opposite conclusion that it cannot be a good thing to harm anyone, simply because there might be a possibility of a common good if there is a definite harm to anyone in particular. So those are the two poles of the debate which separate us, and there are also the two attitudes that one without the other becomes possibly a polarization, a polarized society, and extremes which in their own right are almost take on a totalitarian attitude that either There is no right for the individual in the context of the common good, which is essentially a totalitarian mindset, or that there is only the right of the individual, no matter the cost to the community. Well, that's the inverse of the totalitarian extreme. Both of them are unsavory extremes. We must learn, I feel, to come back together and meet in the middle, and hopefully this debate might prompt us to learn what we need to learn as people and as society to overcome those differences.
Sure,
so
sure.
yeah, that's really it for me.
And we're certainly surrounded by a lot of disruptive forces at the moment. What is it that gives you hope for the future?
I think what we're talking about now is the sense of that where there is this divide, that people are becoming a little more conscious of how they need to be compassionate about other people. So I'm very hopeful about that, even if these two different poles that I've described are coming at it from opposite positions. They're both driven by compassion. And it's that commonality of compassion that I'm hoping people will identify in the opposite camp, and realize actually there is that commonality. So of a compassionate feeling, identity to the human condition that actually is more important than our politics. That's what I'm hoping. Yes.
Good. And James, how about yourself? What are your biggest fears on the impact of the pandemic?
Well, I fear that what we've seen is big corporations being advantaged over the interests of small owner-managed businesses. And I'm afraid it looks to me as if it's deliberate. So lockdown enables big corporations like Amazon and Google and Facebook to do very well, enables big pharma companies to do very well, whilst owner-managers have had to close their operations. They can't carry on their ordinary business. They've been given furlough, yes, but then they've been given loans that they're going to struggle to repay. So I think we've seen a very, very dangerous precedent being set based, I have to say, having looked at the evidence, on no evidence at all. So not a good position. But at the darkest moment comes the opportunity for a wonderful new light. And that's what I saw.
Give us some hope, James. Tell us what hope you spotted.
What was that?
Tell us what hope you've spotted. Give us something to smile
about.
Well,
the hope that we can get back to being ordinary men and women who care about one another and the society we're building. Because if you look back, I met another wonderful lady 5 weeks ago when I was going on my first freedom march, a march of love and freedom in London. I met this lovely lady, Nicola, and she said, well, society is very sick and we're in the third stage of sickness. And you go right back to 1750. A guy called Heinemann, who was the founder of homeopathy, she was describing how his work was rubbished in the early 1900s by Mr. Rockefeller, made a lot of money from oil and decided to put it into pharmaceuticals. So we see, I'm afraid, the moral descent of man as the technical ascent of man has arisen. So now is the wonderful opportunity, because someone has tried to do something quite remarkable, a hostile takeover of planet Earth. We're going to stop it, and it's going to be utterly transformational, and we're going to have a magnificent new world.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little earlier. You explained you've made a claim against the MHRA. How do you think that will go?
Well, first of all, it's not a claim against the MHRA. I wouldn't dream of being so impertinent. The notice of claim is directed at June Monroe of the family Ray. And it isn't a claim, it's putting her on notice that something very odd seems to have happened. So I'm in the belief that an honest mistake has been made, and we are asking June Monroe to reflect and to decide what should happen in the context of that honest mistake. And according to the teachings of Roscoe and of common law, that notice has also been served on the Lord Chief Justice of England. In fact, the notice to June Monroe purports to come from the Lord Chief Justice, and an additional notice has been sent to the Chief Prosecutor at The Hague, who's responsible for international crimes. So what we have, I fear, in this coming winter is something that is going to be quite appalling and quite dreadful. And those working for big government, big corporations, be they private or public organizations, only act through individuals. And those individuals can and will be held accountable, as was discovered in 1947 at the Nuremberg trials. So people need to be very aware that they are individual moral agents. And this is the opportunity for us all to come together and build a wonderful and better world.
And I get good luck with that. And I gather you're going to post some progress on your endeavours in this area on your webpage, Sophie webpage.
Indeed. So later today, we're going to have up on the Sophie webpage some information on how you can become powerful as a business owner by employing this common law of England, the law of the land. And Roscoe's organisation 369 Freedom is going to be working cooperatively with Sophie, and we are going to make business owners powerful by ensuring that those who are the agents of large corporations have to behave morally. And if they don't, they will be held accountable. And we have this wonderful whistleblower legislation that enables those working for these big corporations, even if you're at the top, you might feel utterly trapped by the decisions you've made and things you're being asked to do. There's the opportunity to use that whistleblower legislation to work together to achieve something that is very important.
That sounds positive. Okay, well, thank you very much. I guess finally, Roscoe, any other words you'd like to throw in before we hang up?
Just a couple of points. Having been presented as a champion, I'm not getting the word right, of integrity, but just for the sake of correctness, James and I met actually as a mutual friends, as it were.
Right.
There's this also James mentioned in the 369. If I can just expand on that, the 369, it's a Trinity notice. It's an adept. It's not entirely original idea in as much that it uses a three notice process, which is a long established process of notifying your opponents in a particular matter or a dispute, and with a succession of three notices spread over a period of about 2 months to give them plenty of opportunity of time to respond and settle the matter on the private side, as it were, without taking it into the public arena of the courts. The 369, because we're living in times where these offences that these wrongs that we're experiencing are happening in the public sphere already. They're already in the public sphere. The 369 is designed to condense that two month period of three notices into a single moment of application. But obviously you can't send three successive notices to the same wrongdoer. So it spreads those three notices and involves two other parties who may have superintendents supervisory powers over the wrong or the trespass that's being conducted, in order to bring some authority to bear on the potential wrongdoer. To accelerate a move towards a position where the harm or wrong that's being done is put in check, without having to wait a 2 month period that is normal for the three notice period, the three notice process, excuse me. So those other two parties in the 369 that may have superintendents or supervision is the Office of the Lord Chief Justice. So whoever is sending the 369 in the claim, they are actually appointing the other two, the Lord Chief Justice, who has supervision over common law, and the Chief Prosecutor, in this case at The Hague, because we're dealing with possible crimes against humanity under the provisions of the Coronavirus Act 2020. The claimant is actually designating the Lord Chief Justice and the Chief Prosecutor as the claimant's respondents to the notice, so that the wrongdoer is directed to respond to the Lord Chief Justice or to the office of the Chief Prosecutor at The Hague. So that's really how in a nutshell, how the 369 is organized and its function. So and putting the wrongdoer on notice, you need to stop now. If you've got any problems, contact your boss, the Lord Chief Justice, or the prosecutor at the Hague if you think that your actions may or may not be in compliance or in contradiction to the established laws, whether they be common law, Lord Chief Justice, or statutory law, crimes against humanity, at the Chief Prosecutor at The Hague. So that's the pincer movement. We're not asking we're not pretending that the Lord Chief Justice is writing to them, or that as such, we are simply letting them know we want them to have a dialogue with the office of the Lord Chief Justice and sort it out between themselves. And that's the pressure that the notice, the 369, brings.
And the other thing that was very noteworthy from my perspective was that if you go back to 1947, the Nuremberg trials, the two defences were, I was unaware of what was happening. And the second defence was, I was following orders. So the purpose of this is to formally record that you're put on notice, here's the evidence. And secondly, you can't be following orders if you're committing a harm against another individual, because you then are acting outside your office and you don't have the indemnity that you would expect to have as an office holder. So it's extremely powerful, and it's wonderfully simple. And so the two things that are very important: powerful and simple, and it can be done straight away. Yes. And all the common law lands around the world, everyone can come together to do this. So we're going to be reaching out to our cousins, our friends in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada, United States of America. This is going to be a wonderful movement that's going to drive good through the world and change lives for the better.
And I think what's important is it's happening right now, isn't it? This movement's begun. Okay, well, look, thank you both for taking the time to talk today. Thank you to people watching this presentation. There will be the web pages for both Sophie and 369 Freedom on the screen right now, and there'll be other ways to reach out, so please join in. You'll see there's a lot of things happening at the moment. Make your way to the Sophie website. You'll see a list of publications, of actions and downloads. There will be some membership options growing, I believe, James.
That's right.
So a lot of investment for your benefit, but just join the movement. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alastair.
Pleasure. Thank you, Alastair.
We'll do more.